Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello, and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I'm Frank.
And I'm Rivka.
We're still can't start these for the life of us.
Yeah.
No matter how many times. I can't tell you, our listeners, now we're keeping this. I can't tell you how many times our listeners, we get through the first couple lines and then just don't say anything to each other afterwards and have to retake it.
It's the segue.
It's the segue.
It's hard.
I prefer a hard segue. I prefer just diving right into something. Let's dive in.
We also just recorded an episode, so it's like we've been talking to like fake a banter between us, which is not be ideal. You deserve better.
Yeah.
Listeners.
You deserve honesty from us, and this is us being honest right now. This is the real us. But we did have something we wanted to talk about because, look, I don't watch a lot of, let's call it, trash television. I don't judge people who watch it. A lot of my nearest and dearest watch a lot of trash television. I completely understand the exercise of putting on something that just is so devoid of importance that it just sort of washes over you like a vibe with tertiary with like surface level conflict that is just enough to keep you stimulated, but not so much where it's actually challenged. Like, I get it. I totally get it.
You should be careful, Frank, because some people would consider Survivor exactly that.
And I disagree with that. And we could litigate that here today on the podcast.
And we could litigate it. And I would argue that probably a lot of your defense for Survivor you could use to defend what we're about to talk about right now.
Sure. But every once in a while, something from the trash TV world osmoses itself through the internet waves and actually comes across to me. So I've been seeing this, and I wanted to ask you about it because I've been seeing on the new season of Love is Blind, apparently there have been some real like actual conversations being had. And by actual conversations, I mean, usually on reality shows, it's just people talking about like, which boys or girls they like and like, what the drama in the house is. But this is, I've seen conversations about the state of the working class in the US and about people's distaste for American imperialism on Love is Blind. Or I'm not sure if anyone actually said imperialism. So I wanted to ask you about it because I know that you are a faithful Love is Blind watcher.
Oh, yeah. Well, I am. And I just have to say, this is not the first time we're talking about Love is Blind on this podcast because
That's
a lot
true.
does come from it. And, it just proves that you've never seen any of it because you would know this isn't the first season where these conversations are being had. And there's a lot more discussion on that show than just, I like you, you like you, me like you. And now I see you and I don't like you. It's deceptive because I think the premise of it is so fascinating for anyone who doesn't know. I mean, the title gives it away, but you're in these pods dating for a while. There's a lot, which we've discussed before, of terrible things that happen in terms of how those who are doing the labor, the contestants on the show, get treated.
Yeah, the terrible working conditions.
Yeah, the working conditions, the alcohol consumption, all of that. But they're not seeing the people they're dating. So they're just dating without seeing the person. It's a social experiment based on like, can you fall in love with someone, and will all of like the things that have to do with like not only their looks, but their race. They're also, because you're not meeting people in the context of their class per se, context of their family, their social life, their culture. So it's a lot more than just looks. It's like class, color. So then, of course, inherently, when those things are brought back in, when they propose to each other, not seeing any of those things, and then have to go live a life together and the life is introduced, there's like lots of conversation. Like these things come up because, surprise, surprise, not all of them talk about like, how are we going to deal with this like living thing, this like the money part. And so those things, like there are really fascinating conversations, and you see how they explode. In season 3, I remember there was like a really big, often you see them happen in the more right-wing space. So there was like a lot of abortion conversations, a lot of religious conversations.
Oh, wow.
You see a lot over that. And oftentimes, I think what's kind of new about this season is like usually in these spaces, I can't remember exactly. I know there was, I'm going to not say it right now, but the places of where they were. They've been like, I think it was Florida. Maybe it wasn't Florida. Now I'm not getting my Love is Blind stuff right. But places where there would be more religious ideas that were more common. Like, I'm terrible at how I'm describing this.
Yeah. More like Southern Bible Belt religious traditionalism. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, Frank, for the words. Exactly. And now this season is in Washington, D.C. So you do have like a lot of still sort of like those ideas, but then you're coming across some like, you have policy workers, you have military veterans
Wait, so are all of the contestants people who live in DC or from the DC area?
from DC. Yeah, for the most part,
Oh,
yes. So they do them by
interesting. Okay.
region. And so because DC, it's like these things are being brought out. You have someone who's like dating someone who voted for Trump. And for the first time, that's not like in past seasons, you kind of assume that like the majority of them probably voted for Trump. And that's not so common in this season. So inherently, more politically charged conversations are coming up. There's a really interesting couple, Ramses and Marissa. She's a military vet and has a really interesting journey of her own, I would say, and like what that experience was, why she got into that, her own experience of like gender and biases and like the treatment, like the macho culture of it all that she's kind of expressed and talked about. And he's definitely, I would call him, we're learning that like Ramses is leftist, lefty. They bonded over this sort of like idea of like anti-patriarchy, being more progressive about their gender ideas, the roles of like what it would look like to be together in that. And she was really attracted to that. And so now they're living in their real world and they have this dinner scene where she's talking about, she's now becoming a lawyer, but she's talking about her complicated relationship with having been in the Navy and that she's proud of it, but still working through the things that she did there. And he works for a justice reform nonprofit, again, very leftist, and is essentially comes down to the viewpoint of like, I don't fuck with the army. I respect that was part of your past, but like I'm anti-military. And I'm anti what they're for. And then later this progresses. He goes to meet her friends, who are also a lot of them part of the military. And he, again, I wasn't fully prepared for this conversation, but I'm so excited to be having it. He ends up saying to this group of friends on freaking this big Love is Blind show, like, I think that that is your politics, and your politics are your ethics, because they're basically saying, well, if she went back to the army, could you still be with her? And he says, no.
Damn.
Because that's like your politics are actually, which is huge, because I think a lot of these conversations end at like, well, agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Like, you can do your thing, but I still love you. And he just makes it's such an important point of like, that I think a lot of people align with, of like, no, your politics are not just a thing a separate part of yourself that you make decisions on and then you go back to your normal life. They have to do with your morals and your ethics. And so,
wow.
And he says Palestine. He's like, I can't like be for an army that is a part of he doesn't say genocide, but that is a part of something like,
damn,
what we're doing in Palestine. Like I was like, what? Love is Blind. Now I gotta say he fucks it up. He does fuck it up, because then later the next fucking scene is, the next scene is then he's like, then they have a whole scene about like she doesn't want to go back on her birth control, and he doesn't want to have sex with a condom. I was like, fucking Ramses.
Oh my God.
Damn it.
Come on.
Classic.
Get a vasectomy, you fucking baby.
Classic. That's my ramble on about it.
That's not an uncommon trait in some leftist men. It's just like progressive except for misogyny.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. Because I've been seeing clips of these scenes coming in across like Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and I've been like, what the fuck is happening over on Love is Blind? This is wild. That's really cool. That's really awesome that conversation is getting not just a national platform, like an international platform. Because don't get it twisted, Love is Blind is one of Netflix's biggest shows. So the fact that is being said and that is being aired means that a lot of people and a lot of, let's say, people who are more conservative, traditional values, who still really, really believe like the American military are the good guys. We're the good guys. But that's cool to see. And also it sounds like, it sucks that he
we'll see where that was like where we left off with that. And then I was like, fuck. No, we gotta see.
So maybe the next episode is him being like, man, that was really shitty and kind of sexist of me, and I'm just going to get a vasectomy.
Yeah, we left off with him being like, I'm a really sexual person.
Oh,
And
okay.
you're like, shit.
All right. Okay.
Ramses.
Is it Ramses?
Or maybe it's
Or
Ramses.
Ramsey?
No, it's
Ramses?
Ramses. I think
Oh,
it's
Ramses. I see. I hear what you're saying.
Ramses.
You know, that brings up one thought that I grapple with the American military, and which is that, you know, especially because we know that historically the military largely recruits from poor or working class non-white communities.
Yep.
And white communities as well, for all of the reasons you would imagine. They're the people who have the least amount of economic options, and you know, hey, here's a job for life if you want it with the US military. And we're America, we're the good guys. And obviously the amount of military propaganda that this country is just inundated with on every, you know,
Yes.
if you're an NFL fan, the American military is paying for flyovers constantly. So like this is a class that is largely propagandized to and then sold on this idea that, hey, if you come, you know, work for the military, you're not only serving your country, but we're going to take care of you.
And you'll have your school paid for, you'll have all of these things. And Marissa makes that point, you know, she's like, this is the reasons I'm grateful. I had to do things that I feel very conflicted about, and it's very horrible legacy, but I feel grateful because didn't have any other opportunities, and this gave me that pathway.
100%, but it is ultimately it's a poison pill. It's a false promise, you know. It's you're selling these people on one thing when in reality that's not at all what they're doing. And I think especially as leftists, we need to leave a little bit of space for that in these conversations, because I think it's very easy to see someone in fatigues and just think like, oh, fucking pig, you know, that's the boot, that is the state, that is the armed wing of the state in front of me. And most likely it's probably someone from like a lower socioeconomic background who got sold a false bill of goods. And maybe they'll realize it, maybe they won't. But I think like when discussing the military, I think it's important to add that level of nuance.
Yeah. And I would advocate for people to just watch the scene between them, because it is beautiful, because I think they do communicate really beautifully, you know, until Ramses goes off and you're like, where are you going, dude? But that particular scene, because she makes that point and he hears her, and then he also makes the point, but you know, there is a choice. Like once you know there is you are signing up. It's not signing up. And that's, you know, it's the same thing with the police. Like I worked with a lot of police officers in a theater program that I'd run, and what I found fascinating about that was what I was most interested in that work was also learning like we are all in this system. How do people get pulled into signing up for that project? And I think there is a lot of the similar temptations and like a lot of the similar rhetoric that pulls people in that the army does. But then at some point there's a choice, and like you learn and you know, which is why I think the idea of like, but if you went back now, if you know to go back, I think that's where their conflict lies of like, how would you go back to that?
Yeah, it's the difference between, I guess, ignorance and complicity. Yeah.
And Ramses also came out of like, I should say, I think he came out of the Mormon church.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or did she? One of them came out of the Mormon church, but they have also a really interesting conversation about religion.
All right. Maybe I got to watch Love is Blind. Shit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll keep everyone updated on whether or not I start watching all of Love is Blind.
I know who I can get to watch Love is Blind.
Who?
Harvey K. Harvey K's not above it.
No, I'm sure Harvey will start now after hearing this. All right, but let's get to our conversation, which is just more of the two of us. This is another duet episode of us talking about one of my favorite horror movies, The Cabin in the Woods. But before we do, I just want to remind our audience that we don't sell ads on this show. We rely on community support. So if you'd like to support us, please do that by subscribing to our Patreon.
For $5 a month, you get access to new bonus episodes and our entire back catalog. Our Patreon link is in the episode description in your podcast player, or you can find it at mvcpod.com. Also, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes.
All right, we'll take a break. Be right back with the two of us talking about The Cabin in the Woods. Hey everyone, we've got an amazing organization we want to tell you about called Anti-Capitalism for Artists.
Anti-Capitalism for Artists is an education-based community dedicated to raising the class consciousness of artists.
Their core offering, the 10-week Intro to Anti-Capitalism course, is designed to be accessible to anyone looking to get familiar with a wide range of anti-capitalist concepts and ideas.
They do this by offering an eclectic array of free virtual and in-person events year-round, geared to meet all manner of knowledge backgrounds. Frank and I both took the course in different cohorts, and it really was amazing. You get to meet with a group of people who are interested in anti-capitalism, you build solidarity, and it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah, they put together such an amazing, comprehensive reading list from anti-capitalist writers from all different types of tendencies, from Marx to black radicalism to intersectional feminism to queer liberation to modern-day anti-capitalists. So you really get a firm grounding in a diverse and wide array of concepts.
Artists of all kinds, abilities, and professional statuses are welcome to join A4A's community, where they can learn, build community, and co-create their own events and offerings.
You can learn more, reach out, or support their work by donating at anticapitalismforartists.com or find them on Instagram at anticapitalismforartists.
Love you, comrades. Now back to the show.
All right, Rivka and I are back for another duet, as we are calling these, because that's what it is when two people are just together and usually singing, but we're covering a movie today, just the two of us.
Just the two of us, and what a movie it is. So we've been doing the tradition of like when it's our duet, one of us chooses, and so it was Frank's turn.
It wasn't actually my turn, but I think you were just like, I don't have the space right now. Yes.
I chose it to be your turn. Yes. I find decisions unbelievably hard. Are you an easy decision maker?
Usually. I can be pretty decisive when I need to be, but I'm also like very accommodating. So I think people like interpret that as indecisiveness. Like I'll be like, whatever you want. Like I'm open to anything. Like I'm easy. And people are just like, but that's not helpful. I'm
like, this guy can't make a choice.
Yeah, that's usually, yeah.
All right. So Frank chose, because it's spooky season.
It is.
The Cabin in the Woods. Really exciting because I've never seen it. Well, I've seen it now because I watched it, but I hadn't seen it. And so I did ask Frank, I was like, how scary we talking? And I was told not too scary. And that was true.
Yeah. Firmly a horror comedy for sure.
Mm-hmm. So this movie is directed by Drew Goddard. I'm assuming it's Goddard.
I think he might pronounce it Goddard, but who cares?
You should pronounce it Goddard, I believe. It was written by Drew Goddard and one and only Josh Whedon. Wow. Starring Kristen Connolly, Fran Kranz, Jesse Williams.
Oh, yeah.
I know that person. Got that one. Chris Hemsworth, Anna Hutchinson, Bradley Whitford, yes, and Richard Jenkins. The budget for this movie was $30 million and it grossed $70 million worldwide. And this movie is about a group of kids go to a remote cabin in the woods where their fate is unknowingly controlled by technicians as part of a worldwide conspiracy where all horror movie cliches are revealed to be part of an elaborate sacrifice ritual.
Yep. Didn't have time to write a personalized synopsis for this episode, so I just went with the IMDb synopsis.
I know. I was like, did I?
No.
This
I just it's been a busy week. So a little bit of historical context for this movie. Released on April 13th, 2012, the first movie we covered from this year. And buckle in, trigger warning, 2012 was a fucking terrible year. So just to take us back, on February 26th, Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black 17-year-old, was fatally shot by George Zimmerman in Sanford, Florida, which sparked nationwide outrage. And if you remember anything about that story, it was a pretty dark time. On May 9th, Barack Obama became the first sitting U.S. president to announce support for gay marriage. So that's at least one good thing. July 20th, 12 people are killed and 70 are injured in a mass shooting at a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado during a screening of The Dark Knight Rises with the shooter dressed like the Joker. The Summer Olympics happened that year in London. This was another year of Michael Phelps dominating and winning his 19th Olympic medal in swimming. September 11th, the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, Egypt, and consulate in Benghazi, Libya are attacked by protesters wind up killing 4 Americans in Benghazi, including the U.S. ambassador to Libya. October 29th, Hurricane Sandy, storm surge, slams the eastern seaboard, causes mass destruction in New York and my home state and personal home area of the Jersey Shore, New Jersey. November 6th, Obama is reelected as president of the United States, defeating Republican nominee Mitt Romney. And on December 14th, 26 people, including 20 children, are killed in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. So that is 2012.
Jesus fucking Christ,
Jesus,
2012.
yeah. Jesus fucking Christ is right.
And it was supposed to be the end of the world, according to the Mayan calendar. You remember all that?
Oh my God, that's right. That was the year of the apocalypse, right? Yeah.
Just got a really, I mean, it was apocalyptic in many ways.
There was a whole ass movie about it. Remember that Jake Gyllenhaal movie? I think it was called 2012. Yeah, it was just a movie called 2012.
I mean, this movie definitely, this makes sense that this film came out at this time because the whole thing is apocalyptic.
Very much so.
Yeah, I could see what they were thinking about at the time. Jesus, what a fucking year. That's crazy that all that happened that year. Okay, Frank. So it's spooky season. We know that's part of your decision making here, but why did you pick this movie to talk about on our podcast?
Well, this is one of my favorite horror movies. I mean, I guess technically more of a horror comedy, but I remember seeing this, I think probably 2013-ish, and blew my mind. I was just like, whoa, what an incredible dissection of horror storytelling, horror movie tropes, all the stuff that we love about horror movies, but like really satirizing it and sending it up in I thought like a very fun way. So it like just the premise alone kind of like really hits you as like, wow, this is just what a fun creative idea. And as I was looking at other horror movies to potentially choose, there are a lot of horror movies that have strong ideological messages or are critiquing society in one way or another. There's Get Out, which, has a lot more to say about society than this movie. There's Rosemary's Baby, which we already covered. But these were other ideas churning around. But I landed on Cabin in the Woods because I wanted to revisit it. It had been years since I'd seen it. And there was something in my head that was like, I think there's something in here within the story of, this like clandestine corporate espionage of this facility that is manned almost entirely by white people who are sort of the puppet masters controlling what is happening to our 5 protagonists from afar. And I was like, I think there's something in there to talk about like manipulation, about the way that the system is upheld. And after rewatching it, I was like, yeah, that's all there. We can get into a little bit about, Drew Goddard and his pedigree. Cause like, Drew Goddard.
You mean Drew Goddard?
We could talk a little bit about where he came from. Cause my wager, and I didn't read enough interviews with him about this film. My wager would be that he was really just, satirizing horror movie tropes, and he found this sort of narrative box to put that in. I don't know if he was actually going for a larger societal critique. Maybe there are moments that shine through that think that like that could be the intention of the artist when he was making this. But yeah.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I just said interesting, and I've been editing so many of our podcasts, and I was like, you always say interesting. That was my pause there. So that's let's find a different word. That's sort of caught my fancy because just the idea that you may not be thinking, oh, I'm making a political film. I'm making a statement about the state of horror and where horror, the genre, is going. And that's inherently political. Like, it makes sense that it would be inherently a political, you're talking about industry. You are talking about capitalism. So I think it's why we can do this show, and most movies probably will, some click better than others, but I would say that it's, it's hard to find a movie all movies are political, but like definitely that you'll find messaging there, even if it's not the filmmaker's intent, because if you're tackling any kind of subject, there's inherently a politic attached to it, especially one like the movie industry.
Well, I'd love to hear, first give me your immediate reaction. This is your first time watching it. So like, how did you enjoy the movie?
It was a fun ride. So if you really like some movies, I think it's fine to get spoiled plot. This one, Well, you already, if you're listening this far, we've spoiled a little, which kind of sucks because I thought the ride was so fun because you just plop it on.
Did you have any idea where it was going? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, me neither.
The best way to watch.
Yep.
I'm really like watching like, okay, this will be fun. We're really going to get into like the early aughts horror, all the tropes. Like, okay, I'm not really like, the first 20, 30 minutes, I'm like, this feels like, I guess I'll say some basic stuff about the horror virgin dichotomy. I'm like, what am I going to pull from this? And then it cuts to the Richard Jenkins, Bradley Whitford characters, and you're like, where the fuck am I? They're like these. It just appears. I love that. Like they really do a great job of teasing you the plot line. You're like, what the fuck is going on? They appear to just be these either like governmental figures or corporate figures. You're not even quite sure at the top, but like they're all taking bets on something that's happening that you're like is somehow related to like this horror movie I'm watching. And it's just like so fun how it unfolds, how it's all connected. And it really takes its time revealing this insane plot to you. So it's just really, I thought that was really fun. I have to say, I didn't see it coming.
They do really, you're right. They tease it out for a while and they don't hold the audience's hand through most of it. I don't think it's until about like 35, 40 minutes in where someone
like 40
where someone like
minutes,
actually explains, we are doing this, we are puppeteering these 5 college students because we need to make a ritual sacrifice. And
even still, it's not till the end that you know really, really why. You're like, okay, but why?
Yeah.
And so the why, just a reminder for anyone who hasn't seen it in a while, there's like the ancients, as they call them, underneath.
The ancient ones
that need more, it's not enough for them to have your old school ritual of just, it's based in the tropes. So you have the like classic horror, the jock, the fool, and the virgin. And the whore, the jock, and the fool have to die. The virgin in these rules like doesn't have to die, just has to suffer a little, but she has to be the last one standing.
Yep. Oh, and the scholar. Don't forget the scholar.
Oh, and the scholar, of course. But then what's revealed is like the ancient gods have gotten bored with this old sacrifice and they want more entertainment, so they've kind of needed the humans, I guess, to like appease them, have like made this reality show, like just this really complex reality show of killing these in this ritual. And that's why it's like so absurd. And I guess along the lines that you're saying, like I could see the idea, the critique of like, oh, I guess the ancients are supposed to be like, even still, I was like, under that, I'm not really certain who they're supposed to be, like not old Hollywood. Like, who would you say that would be if it's a critique on film? It didn't fully feel like, I was like, they're a bigger power, right? Like there's some kind of bigger power. I wasn't clear who under that critique it would be.
Yeah, see, this is why I think that maybe Godard's intention wasn't to necessarily be a critique of, let's say, the Hollywood studio system or the Hollywood like the Hollywood film industry and the way that horror films specifically are produced, or
just
a larger
audience in general.
Yeah, or a larger societal critique. I guess maybe an audience in general. Maybe it's this idea that, especially in the horror genre, and especially during this time in the 2012s, like this is kind of like maybe the peak, maybe like a little bit of the denouement of the torture porn era of horror, which kind of like kicked off with the Saw franchise, which was really just like, this isn't even so much about, jump scares or scary ideas or, it's just more about like, let's just show you the most violent, grotesque, tortuous stuff on film to elicit that sort of reaction. So maybe it's some kind of critique on that.
Yeah.
But there's also the line near the end that Sigourney Weaver gives, which also like fucking,
that was my note. I go, so good. Again, like on top of it, you're like, and then at the very last minute, you're gonna pull out motherfucking Sigourney Weaver. Like, yes, this is how you tell a story, even if it doesn't fully make sense.
100%. And I was like, she is so game. This is awesome. Like she's showing up for like a few days to shoot. She's gonna wrestle around on the ground with like,
she probably made a nice amount of money too.
I'm sure she did. I'm sure look, I'm sure they paid her well, but like she didn't have to do this, I was just like, this is cool. This is not a glamorous cameo, but Anyway, she says, it's our task to placate the ancient ones. You have no idea what came before. And there's also an allusion she makes to that, like, these monsters that we learn about. This facility is filled with all of these different types of horror movie monsters. They came from the old world, from like the ancient world. So they are a part of, I don't know, whatever creatures the ancient ones had created originally, something like that. This is why I'm saying, like, it gets a little bit muddled. So I don't know, maybe the ancient ones are just audiences, and their need for ever increasing violence and extremity in horror storytelling. That's potential. I mean, if we're looking at this from an anti-capitalist lens, which we try to do, you know, that's kind of where I felt like maybe the critique has a little bit more of like a one-to-one analogy. Like there's like a lot of lines, especially from the fool character, who is played by Fran Kranz. Learned that that's that actor's name, Fran Kranz. And you know, he has a few lines about like society needs to crumble. You know, he's kind of like he's the stereotypical like, whoa, man, have you ever thought about like society stuff? Yeah, he's the stoner.
He's a stoner.
But at the end, I know we've jumped to the end, but we'll trail back. But he says to Sigourney Weaver, if you've got to kill all my friends to survive, maybe it's time for a change. So, you know, I don't think that Godard was intending to create an anti-capitalist critique with this film, but
there's a lot. I'm curious if Godard is like there's like that idea of like blowing up the system seems very clearly like there's literally a big red button that says system, and she goes to hit it to blow it up. And that was the biggest theme, right? Was like, do we just have to kill it all to like reemerge? It made me think of a way less elegant, graceful Snowpiercer, but that same idea at the end of like, is our only option to get off this train completely? And that seems to be the options given.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, he even had like a hand come up at the end of one of the ancient gods, and I was like, is that the invisible hand of the market? I don't know. But the reason that I'm skeptical about Godard's intentions is because, I mean, he's someone, I don't know if you know much about him as a writer filmmaker. He's someone who, like, the Hollywood studio system has been very good to.
Love.
Like, had he was I was reading a little bit about his bio. He, in like the late 90s, wrote a spec script for 6 Feet Under, got it in the hands of an agent, got staffed on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, and then or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Hence him and Josh Whedon. And then from there, he's just like, he wrote on Lost. He's written on a bajillion TV shows. He's written movies. Now he's directing. Like, this is a guy who has benefited extremely well from the system. So that's why I'm skeptical that he wrote a movie intentionally being like, we got to blow up this fucking system that literally has given me millions and millions and millions of dollars. I don't know.
Maybe. But I think sometimes that you can have that, and, you know, it still wasn't like I would say that the Bradley Whitford character and the Richard Jenkins character are the two writers.
Yep.
Because they're like the white dudes behind the levers, basically being privileged off of this system that is running off of human flesh and sacrifice and torture. I mean, and that was to me, that was like the most radiating theme, was just this idea that human sacrifice keeps the privilege of the status quo, keeps moving, like allows humanity to keep rolling. I was like, sounds like capitalism to me, you know, that like, that's literally the name of the game since the beginning, whether it was like the children who were being sacrificed to the factory system, or now the workers at Amazon being sacrificed, or every sacrifice that we have to make in our daily lives. Like, so much sacrifice literally goes into maintaining this illusion that capitalism has over us, so that we can just still have our iPhones and still, you know, have what we call privileges. Like, we would rather have these privileges over human rights, you know? Like, we don't have healthcare, but yay, my privileges.
Yeah. Also, like police violence, you know, police repression that protects private property, or the fact that we don't have, like you're saying, we don't have a national healthcare system in the U.S. These are all forms of violence that maintain the system, which is capitalism. And I mean, and if we want to graft that onto this movie, it's a pretty
it was
clear.
so there. It was so
Yeah.
there, which was pretty surprising to see. Because I think you're right. Like, I was like, I don't know. I know people, when they talk about this, when I was doing research, were like, this is about the movies and where horror is going. I'm like, is it? I'm more grasping at straws for that than I am for like, this seems to be about like, yeah, about capitalism without, of course, again, without saying it, but like there's so many other hints there too, like particularly in just the way that the Bradley Whitford character, the Richard Jenkins, that whole corporatized world is set up that's supposed to look kind of government. I guess they are government agency. They never really
maybe
say,
it is more
right?
government than corporate, because they have someone from the military there, although military contractors exist.
It's government, but like they dress them corporate, and it looks like they could be any other day at the office. They're just like the way that they're betting on the victims of their sacrifice,
or which monster they're gonna pick,
right? Which monster they're gonna pick, like how desensitized they are. I like that it was like not just military, but it was also like it put the accountability on that corporate world as well, and it made it feel like, without saying money, like it felt like this has something to do with capital, even though it never says it. And then of course it ruins it by being like the ancients. I'm like, who the fuck are the ancients? Like, it could be so much more interesting if it wasn't the ancients, if it was like, yeah,
it would be. That if I was going to change one thing about this movie, it would be that. It would be the whole like there are literally ancient gods beneath our feet. One of them is going to pop up out at the end, because that just it doesn't feel additive. Not only in the story that they're telling, but also in sort of the metaphor that we are extrapolating from it.
It's like so close to being like, I want Bong Joon-ho to like to just redo the Cabin in the Woods, like it's because it's like, I feel like that's like, it's so close to being something like that, like a Parasite, but it's not. But it's like you said, they're blinded by their own perspective, and probably like, but I guess going all the way back to the point I was making was like also just the centering of like, I would say the leads of the movie really are those two white guys.
Oh, okay.
Because they're the ones that you sort of like have the most.
I mean, it opens with them. They're the first scene.
It opens with them, and you have the closest, like the most POV from, like, because the other, the people who are stuck in the cabin in the woods never make it beyond their tropes really intentionally, but like they're still stuck in their horror tropes. We don't know much about them. They're not fleshed out characters to me, and I feel like you have more of an emotional resonance with those two dudes. So even though you're shitty, they do have moments where you're like, oh, they're having realizations about their role in this, or maybe they're like feeling I just felt like there was a little bit of, oh, okay, this is about them, and that's where the writers live, and it's still from that point of view.
No, that totally makes sense. I definitely viewed the two of them as sort of like PMC neoliberals in our metaphor. Like they they feel that they are the good guys, and they are doing this and maintaining this system because it is for the good of the world, which is an excuse we hear all the time from capitalists, or I don't know, just people just trying to justify their horrendous actions. Like, this is for the greater for the greater good. But then they also have these like you're saying, these really moments of detached emotion where it's like they can empathize to a point, but then as soon as like someone walks in with a tequila bottle, they don't care anymore.
Yes, that was a brilliant moment. Bradley Whitford's so good, but like when he's like, it's strange, I'm almost rooting for her. Tequila is my lady. That was actually such a brilliant scene. It really was, because it's like, again, you can't tell me that wasn't a critique on like how people are so easily detached when you're like built into the system that you're depending. Like, what choice do I fucking have though? Like, no, what's the phrase? Like, no something consumption under capitalism. What is that freaking phrase?
No ethical consumption.
No ethical consumption under capitalism. Like, I understand the meaning of that, and yet sometimes I feel like that's used as like a, well, fuck. What the fuck am I gonna do? Like, I understand it, but there's also that vibe, a little. And I think that there was like something in that moment of like, shit, like I feel there was that other security guard who's like, why are we betting? But the truth is, like, what does it fucking matter in some ways if you bet or don't bet, if you're just part of the system making this happen? Like, actually, what difference did it make? It didn't make a difference for that dude in his journey. He didn't do shit. He just like felt a little bad.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's just like, oh, I feel a little bad. You know, but I'm not going to I'm not going to change. I'm not going to take action. I'm not going to rebel. I'm not going to, you know.
That's the neoliberal critique of like, oh, well, we feel bad, but we're still going to do it. Like, oh, you know, I have empathy for the
That's what I was just going to say, the
Palestinians.
exact same thing. Because like that, I mean, it's almost October 7th again. It's very much on the forefront of our minds. But that exact thing that I've seen from liberal friends of mine posting just like, this is so sad what's happening. I just wish that everyone was safe. But vote blue and like,
no matter who.
you know, but it's so sad. It's so sad. And I just wish that children stop being killed. And sorry, that's not.
And to clarify, there's a difference between, like, I understand people who are like, I'm making a strategic choice to vote for Kamala, right? Versus the vote blue no matter who mentality.
Yes.
Which is very much like this. It's like, well, we don't have it's the ancients are going to tear us down, so we got to do the sacrifice.
Yeah, what do you want them
like,
to rise up? What do you want them to
I
rise
feel
up? What do you
bad.
want Trump to get elected? Like, we got to do this violence. You know, we have to. Because if we don't, then the alternative is so much worse.
It's everyone versus this small few, which is interesting that the choice at the end was like, you know what? If this is where we're at, maybe we got to do a drastic change, burn it all down.
I mean, and that is ultimately what our two, you know, horror protagonists do at the end.
And I think it's the best they could do. I don't think they're prepared for any other option. It is not my choice. I'm the more I've thought of, you know, I'm not like burn it all down until there's like a bigger plan, because I think because the ancients, I guess, do win in this scenario. It sounds like they'll just build another system of wherever they get their humans or whatever. They'll find a way to get their blood ritual, I guess, in this particular.
And that's the other thing
universe.
about this Ancient Ones metaphor is that in this world, this shadowy government agency, Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins, they are correct. Sigourney Weaver is correct. Do you know what I mean? Like the fact that the Ancient Ones arise at the end, supposedly to now, I don't know, wreak havoc over the entirety of humanity. What the movie is saying is, we do need to have this violence to maintain this system. This is how it works. So, you know what I mean? So like, so that's a depressing, but also like another reason why I'm like, I don't think Godard's critique was actually intentional in the way that we're talking about it.
No, you're right. Absolutely not. It's funny though, because even like wrestling with that point or wherever this plot line came from for Godard. And we done. You can't, like, even in trying to make that point, you show your cards. You know what I mean? Like, even in trying to make that point, you're like, yeah, but that's stupid. And you wrote it. So, like, what if the hand didn't fucking come up? Like, what if everything was fine?
What if everything, that would have been the more radical choice. What if everything was just fine?
And, like, who the fuck are the ancient? They were, like, the old world gods. It's so weird. But I guess, what are you going to, I mean, they were also, like, every horror thing you could think of did actually exist.
Yes,
so
I mean, like, look, it's a fantastical movie. There's a lot of completely nonsensical things in this movie, so like we excuse it a little bit, but I think this is important because like I think investigating this is that's what's so interesting about this, is trying to unearth what the movie is actually saying, and what it ultimately is saying is that like, yeah, we got to do violence to uphold the system. But you're right, like there are so many other great critiques in here. I love you, baby. Bye.
We're keeping that. We're keeping that.
There's so many other, my partner just left for work, great critiques in here, you know, but which are a little bit more surface level. I think a little more surface level and easier to make, because I think, like you're saying, all of the depiction of this, you know, corporate government agency, whatever, the office building, the tedium, like the shitty snack machines, you know, the different departments within it, and the way that they all are kind of disparaging to one another, the corporate hierarchy, you know.
They have such a great scene right before they find out that they thought they like made it. They thought the sacrifice was done, and the fool had like actually made it off and they didn't know. And right before that information is disclosed, they're celebrating. And they have such specific details about this office place that you're describing. And one of my favorite lines was like, they're talking about like, do you think we get OT for this? And a dude's like, well, I'm an intern, so I don't qualify for OT.
Yeah, like that stuff is in there. Yeah.
Again, that like makes you think like there's something being wrestled with, either consciously or unconsciously.
Definitely. Although I do think like office life is a pretty easy setting to make fun of. I'm sure like everyone has their take on why, working in an office sucks, why coworkers suck. Anyone who has seen Office Space has that within them now. So like that's just like if you're setting something in a corporate looking office, like you can have a lot of fun with that, and it doesn't.
But it's so unique to set it against the backdrop of like, yeah, but your overtime is because you were sacrificing human beings. Like that makes it a unique
for sure.
standout.
100%. It's a different, yes, their business is different. Their business is very different than like Office Space's Initech, which makes like computer chips, but like all I'm saying is that I think it's become easy for writers, creators, artists to specifically make fun of like office life. I mean, there was also The Office, which ran for 39 seasons or however long The Office was. So like now I feel like it's just kind of.
But that was like a particularly like, I just thought like you can make fun of so many things in Office. That just to me is like there were not many lines, as like one line to focus in on felt so about money and about about the material. Like, no, I'm worried about like, well, I'm not going to get extra money for killing these people because I'm an intern. Like, I just. But
then there's the other stuff that's like, when they're taking bets, and Bradley Whitford says, maintenance bets on the same thing every single year. They're like, why don't they change it up? I was like, well, if they were creative, they wouldn't be in maintenance. So there's also just kind of like that snipey, like bullshitty corporate hierarchy aspect of it, which is just more of like, hey, we're just going to have fun within this.
The West Wing. Is this the West Wing? Exactly. Or is this like Cabin in the Woods? Honestly, wouldn't fucking know. Another thing I thought was just interesting. I'm just going to say interesting because I can't think of a different word.
Fascinating. Compelling.
Thank you. Compelling is good because fascinating, I don't know if it's fascinating, but it was compelling. Was even in the horror tropes, like as they were playing with them, how that related to a battle against capitalism. Because the idea too is like, okay, but they have to make the choice, but they do all these things like the government puts in gas to try and make them make certain choices. So it's also occurred to me that's like the fake ideology of free will in under capital of just like, no, they're making the choice, but we're putting things in their hair dye and we're blowing gas into the air. And then it's very fun that like the reason that the fool makes it past that is because his weed, he's like, for some reason the weed makes him like what was it? Like it doesn't affect him because he's smoking this strain.
He like had a different stash that they weren't able to alter, so it immunized him to all of their cognitive decline chemicals that they were spraying everyone with.
But I love the one where they're like, okay, their instinct, the four of them, their instinct was like, we're gonna stick together, which was obviously them making fun of the horror film, like, let's split up, which always happens, and like no one's instinct would ever be to split up. Yeah. But I like that just made me think about how inherently our instincts are always right, and capitalism is actually the opposite of our instinct, and how much work there is happening behind the scenes to make us alter from that. Like a lot is going in. Like there's a lot of money and effort going into making us act contrary to our instinct for community, for like mutual aid, for anything, like, so in this case they're like putting shit in the hair dye. I mean, just doing crazy shit that you're like, how much planning did that take? But in our reality, like the amount of that goes into like what's going to be on our social media, the ads we see, just like everywhere we're getting messaging, and it's the same shit, but they're doing it in this invisible capacity because they want you to think, no, that's your free will. People are making those choices. People want consumerism, like they want to buy all those things. This isn't that, and the market's just giving you what you need and what you're responding to human nature, not the other way around.
I love that. That hadn't even dawned on me, but you're right. That is such a good example of, like you're saying, the false illusion of freedom, really. The false illusion of freedom and free will. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say free will because like that's to me, that's more of like a philosophical
Right.
concept, whatever. But
Well, I mean free will by like not in the bigger sense, but in the sense of like under capitalism provides free will. That to me is not true. Like capitalism does not
no,
provide free will
nor freedom.
nor freedom. You're
Yes,
constantly
and
being
it's
manipulated. And like I guess we have deep down a free will that I'm naming more of like that instinctual, intuitive place that we can choose to follow. So I guess in that sense, but like the way in which free will is used as an ideological
100%.
tool.
The idea that, like, you know, we're told constantly in America, like, this is the freest country on earth. Like, really? I'm free to sell my labor to the highest bidder, you know, like literally sell my body off, sell my mind off to someone so that they can profit from it. Oh, I'm free because I get to choose what kind of healthcare that I have. Oh, but actually it's just like all this horrific for-profit system that doesn't actually prioritize care in any way. And there are people.
It's a democracy that people choose.
Yeah, that people. Another great example. We live in a democracy. Oh, there's not actually these puppet masters, these corporate hierarchies, these capitalists, these oligarchs, these billionaires, these fucking these CEOs,
APAC, yeah.
these board of directors that aren't actually pulling the strings behind every single decision that gets made for the mass populace of the country that we live in. You're right. That's that's precisely what's happening in this movie, and it's exactly what happens under capitalism, especially here in the United States.
Yeah. Question about, so there was like, they have videos from around the world where I guess this is happening, which was fascinating too, because it suggested, I guess, that like, I didn't really understand it. It's like sort of suggested that like other places did other people like, to me, the ancients, I was like, if that giant hand is coming up, it's probably destroying the world. But then it sort of like had this like nationalist, like we're all kind of doing our own rituals for our own ancients, or like, you know, like there was some kind of like nationalist war. So like the Japanese and the Americans are the ones who are like are still going at the top. And what happens in the Japanese like reality TV show for these ancients is that they have a bunch of 9-year-old girls who sort of evoke the Ring-esque
Evil spirit
character, evil spirit. But what they end up doing, which is so great, was like the 9-year-old girls transform the evil spirit into like a happy frog. And then Bradley Whitford says, "You want good product, you got to buy American." And I was like, what does it mean? Like, can you explain that section to me? That one went over my head a little.
So like my surface level take on that was this was Godard's way of sending up the style of horror movies that historically have come from different international bodies. So I mean, I don't think anyone I don't know a ton about horror. Like I don't know like deep in the woods about horror, but I think if you talk to any like serious horror fan, they would say maybe something like, you know, Japan and Italy's horror movies are like far surpass you know America's contribution to the genre. So I think this was just Godard's way of kind of like shoehorning that into here and saying like we're doing the more American horror movie narrative trope, but like let's also like have fun over here and show you how other countries do their horror. And so, but
in the logic of the world,
they are all technically working together. All of the international communities, they only need one ritual to be successful in order to appease the ancient ones. So at the beginning they say like, hey, all of the other rituals have failed. It's come down to Japan and us. And they're like, well, Japan has a perfect track record. We're number 2. So hopefully everything will be fine. So there is international cooperation, but there's also international competition, which I thought was also very on the nose for like, I don't know, how transnational corporations operate. It's like, oh no, we're all about synergy and, you know, like, you know, vertical integration and blah, blah, blah. But really it's about competition at the end of the day. It's like who can stand up and be like, we're number 1. We did it. We're the top capitalists.
Yeah. You want good product, you gotta buy American.
And then real quickly, just, you know, we haven't talked a ton about it, about the horror tropes, because that kind of isn't as, you know, germane to our conversation. But I love all of this stuff in here. Like, this is the first time I noticed that the first shot of our lead girl, who's the virgin character, it's just her in her panties and a little t-shirt. I'm like, and I understand, like, if you're watching this for the first time, you don't know where this movie's going. You're like, of course that fucking shot is in here, like, unnecessarily. But then, like, I do love the way that they unpack all of these tropes. My favorite, without a doubt, is Mordecai the Harbinger. Still my favorite scene. Still makes me laugh so hard. When he calls up Bradley Whitford and he's like, "Am I at speakerphone?"
I mean, if we were really gonna unpack, like, if we were gonna pull out some political messaging from that, I mean, it is interesting that like they're like this corporate elitist sort of in the White House characters using this dude who's like, you would say like poor white, like I don't know where they are. They're the cap. Did they ever say
No,
where
I don't
they
think
are?
we ever actually get a
Nondescript, but it feels Appalachian-esque character, and they're like, he really believes in this shit and it's like full on for it, and they're just like making fun of him as like another, it's just like, okay, like laughing at him for being a cog in their wheel.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's like, manipulating someone from like a lower socioeconomic status who's like, he's like a useful idiot. He's like someone who like really...
He's like a deplorable to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. And they have like such disdain for him. And he's a war veteran. Probably Vietnam, I'm guessing. He says, which war.
Yeah, it's really funny.
I think that's it. This was a tight conversation. This is also a tight movie. This movie is like 95 minutes long, which you have to love a 95-minute long feature film. Yeah.
All right, let's give it some awards.
Let's do it.
Best politics. You all know character with best politics in the movie. Who's it going to be?
It's got to be Marty the Fool, Marty the Stoner.
Yeah. It's got to be Marty the Stoner. I mean, I can't. Yeah. Or their very tiny part, but the 9-year-old Japanese girls who take the evil spirit and transform it into a happy frog, I think they just like inherently were like, we're more powerful than this shit.
That's true.
Like they kind of got there. They got to where Marty the Fool eventually gets to without having to go through all the suffering and shit. And maybe there's something that, it's very American to have to like go through all that shit. And they were just like, we'll make you,
that's a good runner up. Yeah. They're like, it's like that you can infer they're doing that thing in a horror movie where they're like, guys, rather than like fight each other and like try to escape, let's come together as a community and like, we'll defeat the evil spirit with love,
which is the better politic. And they do. Yeah.
He articulates some of the most clear ideas.
Time for
you
a
have to kill all of my friends to survive. Maybe it's time for a change. So, Marty. All right, worst politics. Who has the worst politics in this movie?
I mean, I guess it would be the ancients, but I can't even. I don't believe in them. I refuse. So my question would be like, was Sigourney Weaver somehow felt more like powerful, somehow like more powerful than the two?
Yes, she's upstairs. Because they throughout they're like upstairs, downstairs. Like upstairs is Sigourney Weaver, downstairs is the Ancient Ones.
So it's probably got to be her for me, with a nice runner-up of Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, she's the one that kind of comes out and again articulates this completely ludicrous idea that we must use violence to uphold this system. So Sigourney Weaver again, shout out Sigourney Weaver.
Amazing. And then our last award. Best supporting character spinoff. Interesting. This is the first one where I'm like, I'm not compelled to. I was good. I would good. I didn't really need to see much more.
I would maybe like watch more of Mordecai the Harbinger, but I don't know what that movie is, and like I don't want to see his backstory. I just kind of.
Is there a Cabin in the Woods too?
I don't think so.
Okay, I hope not.
I don't believe so.
Disturbing. Yeah, there is.
There is?
Yeah, that's what it says. Well, it doesn't wait, what is this? The Cabin in the Woods 2 Resurgence trailer 2024. Is that 2019?
I don't know. There's also a bunch of there's Knock at the Cabin.
Oh, someone made it as like a fan made trailer.
You know what? I would watch more of the intern character. Like show me his first day at this government agency where he is learning all about, these horrific monsters that they're all housing right above their heads, and the fact that they have to like kill 5 teenagers in order to, maintain the entire world order. Yeah, give me that. And then he's also like bouncing between the different departments. That was fun. I would like see more of like.
Is he the one doing the hair dye? Like who's going in, switching her hair dye? I want to see all that. Yeah, totally. All right, that does it. I think we
covered it.
thoroughly
Yeah.
got into this.
I'm so glad you enjoyed this.
If you, of course, have any thoughts, you can always go on our Patreon page and comment on the episode. I love when people share their thoughts because there's always something that we missed.
I'm
or didn't
sure
see, so
we're going to get an
please.
email or a comment that's like, if you had just read this one interview with Drew Goddard from 2015 with Wired Magazine, you would know that blah, 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 blah. So,
Well, I love when that happens. I'm like, yeah, I
that's
didn't
true.
read it.
You know what?
Thank you for sharing.
I do appreciate when people share things. I do. I don't want to discourage people from sharing things. I do not like it when people are like, "You fucking missed this, you idiot." So just don't do that. Just don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't get it
We
that
don't
often,
get that
but
very
it
often.
does happen sometimes.
Don't write me your defense letters of Woody Allen. That's all.
No, don't do that to Rivka.
It's happened. Don't do it again.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok if you like. And if you want to support this show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in your episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com. Also, if you're part of a leftist or progressive organization and you would like to advertise on this podcast, shoot us an email at moviesversuscapitalism@gmail.com.
For next week, we'll be watching the 2012 crime drama Killing Them Softly.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.